Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mysteries and Disappearances video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's start this whole new series here, some of it based on your suggestions. This one actually having to do with an entry that I found online on a website that chronicles some of the more recent disappearances, recent being like in the year 2000 or above. When I was reading this information, it's yet another example of someone just being dropped off and then never ever being seen again on the face of the earth. In fact, the information related to her disappearance is so mysterious, especially with what was found still left in the apartment, that I just had to share it here. And then that way, who knows, maybe someday, sometime soon, her information or her whereabouts will be found. But you're looking at a picture of her now. Let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. It's the disappearance of Cindy Song. So what happened to Cindy Song? Well, the actual disappearance occurred on November 1st, 2001. So again, more recent, past the year 2000 or so. Cindy actually had a real name. Her name was Hyun Jong Song, but at least here in America, she ended up going by a nickname, a more American name called Cindy. She was born back on February 25th, 1980. She was born to a South Korean family. She lived there actually in South Korea up until 1995. That's when she ended up moving to Virginia to live with some relatives, an aunt and an uncle, while she attended a local high school. And then, like most other high school students, right after she graduated, she ended up going to a university. This was the Pennsylvania State University, and that's essentially where she was up to the point of her disappearance. So here's what happened. It actually ties into Halloween as well. Right on that fateful day or fateful night, she was there at the university, and in fact, she was going to attend a costume party. There was a location called Players Night Club. Those of you that are in that area there for Pennsylvania State University or State College, Pennsylvania, let me know. Is that something where the nightclub is still there, or did it change? Something along those lines. But she was going to stay there. She was with some friends, one girl by the name of Stacy, another one by the name of Lisa. And this was a costume party. So she was actually attending there as a Playboy bunny, as you see in some of these pictures here. Well, this party ended up going well into the night, 2 a.m. I imagine 2 a.m. that's when the club had to shut down. I remember seeing some episodes of certain bars, and there's always usually actually a curfew where at a certain point bars have to shut down. So it ended up happening right at 2 a.m. Her friends took her back over to another apartment, not hers, but a friend's apartment. And then she stayed there for a little bit more, playing some video games. Literally, those were the last moments, really, that anyone would have seen her, because at 4 a.m., they finally decided to drop her off back at her apartment. So in other words, Cindy's actual apartment. And then that was it. She was never, ever seen again. She was dropped off. Who knows if they saw her heading up to the apartment or somebody actually let her inside the apartment. But either way, she was there and then never seen again. Now, here's where things get very, very mysterious, because obviously she was not found. Obviously, like, she ended up going missing. And then when that happened and there was a search of her apartment, there was no forced entries, like nothing in terms of the apartment being broken into or the lock being taken off. No signs of struggles, nothing. In fact, if anything, she still had a lot of her own personal things right there in her apartment, stuff that's usually important to people. For example, she had her cell phone still there. I believe her purse was still there as well. That contained not only her credit cards, but also her driver's license. On top of that, she also had a backpack that she usually carried around everywhere, but it was still there right at that location. And then even looking at some of her information, like the cops were looking at her emails and some of her recent activity, I guess online, nothing seems to indicate anything suspicious at all. In fact, all indications point that she was still in her Playboy bunny costume when she ended up disappearing. And who knows, essentially, if anyone else saw anything around that apartment. You would think that somebody still dressed up in a Playboy bunny would easily be seen, right? Like, you would see that, and obviously somebody would remember later on what occurred. But no, nobody had anything at that point. So maybe everyone else was still asleep and it was just pitch black, and who knows what happened to her. But the early indications are that nothing nefarious occurred in her apartment. And if anything, she ended up leaving the apartment of her own free accord, at least based on loose estimations. Oh, yeah, and other things that point to her having important things in the apartment was this. She had an exam that was due on the 6th, and her friends would always tell her she's the kind that's into school, into grades. She a very important exam, so she wouldn't just leave before that. Also, she had two Britney Spears concert tickets right there in the apartment for that upcoming concert. Again, her friends believe she wouldn't just outright disappear right on her own. And other indications are that night itself, she didn't seem upset. She didn't have any kind of bad issues. She was seen, in fact, as being happy and upbeat, especially with the costume party and then that other apartment visit when it came to playing those video games. Everything again seemed to indicate that she was perfectly fine. The police even looked around a wooded area nearby the apartment and the campus, but no indications as to what occurred to her other than the fact that something must have happened. She left. Closest theory is that there was some kind of nearby 24-hour supermarket that she decided to apparently visit. I'm wondering, and I'm sure that the cops did this as well, if there was footage, like let's say in terms of cameras nearby the supermarket showcasing somebody in a Playboy bunny walking around. But that's pretty much the only known theory that has any credibility is that she left her apartment to go to a 24-hour supermarket, and then based on that analysis, somewhere along the way, she ended up being abducted. Like somebody actually saw her, abducted her, and then that was it. There is one more even looser theory, and that's the idea that she left with someone that she knew, and then whoever this was ended up causing something bad to her, even to the point that they ended up killing her. But all the police investigations apparently showcases that nothing came about from it. I'm sure that if it was someone that she knew, there would have been a close circle of friends indicating all the possible potential suspects, but nothing came about from that too. There were some other indications here and there. For example, a couple of days later after Cindy disappeared, somewhere there in Philadelphia, there was a woman that was matching her description, and apparently this unknown woman was being pushed into a car by an unidentified man, and I believe this is the sketch associated with it as well. And so this was one of the most closest indications of what could have happened outside of the theory that she was going just to the supermarket. There was even a reward of $27,000 that was going to be given in terms of this case, but so far nothing has been claimed because obviously there's been no definitive proof as to what happened to Cindy. Finally, there was one more potential incident that involved a potential suspect, but this is the loosest one yet. And in this case, it's probably not even something that was considered too much. Somewhere there in Philadelphia, there's a Chinatown district, but you got to think this is now 200 miles away from her apartment. Apparently, a similar looking woman to Cindy, like somebody that could be described as looking like Cindy outright, was seen being pushed also into a car. And apparently she was screaming, crying for help. But then there was an unknown man that was doing this. And then he, in turn, was telling some of the nearby witnesses, yelling at them essentially to leave. And because of this, nobody knew what happened to them afterward. But again, no indication as to who that woman was, and then also no indication as to who that man was as well. And then that's pretty much it. There is one last interesting result to showcase here with regards to a potential link. This was actually linked to all things to a bank robbery. There was a guy by the name of Hugo Selensky, and apparently he in turn was involved with a bank robbery, and then he was also known as a serial killer. Well, one of his accomplices, a guy by the name of Michael Krakowski stated that he and then also Hugo had abducted a woman. He was telling this to police. They abducted and ended up killing a woman that matched, again, Cindy's description, kind of like the earlier story I just mentioned a minute ago with that other woman in Philadelphia. But the actual bodies that were found, because Michael was able to take the police over to the location, some kind of property that belonged to Hugo Selinski. There were 5 bodies there. None of those bodies with DNA testing ended up being Cindy's. And in fact, he stated that's because she was actually buried on another part of the property. But again, nothing was found in terms of Cindy and in terms of her body or anything related to her disappearance, despite the fact that he was stating this information outright. Cut to a couple of years later, then in 2014, and on a similar area, I guess, of Selinski's property, that's when authorities mentioned that they now found 7 more bodies. So now we're talking about a total of 12. And then whenever they were looking at the information as to whether any of that ties into Cindy, apparently nothing was linked, nothing at all. I don't know if this involved anything like DNA or something else involving some kind of other physical description or physical evidence, but nope, nothing along those lines. So that was, again, the closest next link in terms of something involving Cindy's disappearance, or at least the remains associated with her body, but still nothing has been indicated to that. Even to this very day, her body has never, ever been found, even though that guy, Michael Krakowski, is still somewhat considered a suspect in this case. But that's it. That's everything associated with this disappearance, this poor girl, Cindy. She was there going to Pennsylvania State University. She was enjoying a night out on Halloween in a Playboy Bunny costume. She ended up going to one apartment for some video games and then finally being dropped off to her apartment. And nobody ever saw her again. But again, who knows? Maybe someday the poor family, they'll have something linked that'll showcase what occurred to her. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.